joy and opportunity to attend the Radically Rural Conference in Keene, New Hampshire, and I've talked about this before at length. But it's always a really fantastic opportunity for me to connect to new colleagues, to learn more about what's happening in rural spaces in and around the arts. And this year was a really great year because I had the opportunity to meet Ash Hanson, the founder and creative executive officer of the Department of Public Transformation. I will say that again: creative executive officer and Department of Public Transformation. This is an important element of the title and name of the organization. But I'm really excited to talk to Ash today. The Department of Public Transformation is a nonprofit organization working at the intersection of creativity and civic life in rural communities across the United States. With over 2 decades of experience engaging small towns, Hanson specializes in activating stories, building neighbor-to-neighbor connections, and unlocking collective imagination in regions often overlooked by mainstream cultural investment. Prior to founding DoPT, she launched Place-Based Productions, a site-specific theater company that creates original musicals celebrating small-town life and catalyzing civic dialogue. Hanson's practice has included artist in residence roles embedded within both the City of Minneapolis Planning Department and the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership, where she integrated creative community engagement into planning and development processes. Her leadership has been recognized by major national fellowships. She is a 2018 Obama Foundation Fellow and a 2019 Bush Foundation Fellow, honored for her work in rural cultural leadership and civic transformation. Her guiding convictions that art is an essential ingredient in civic life, that rural places harbor untapped creative power, and that playful participatory practice can activate deep and lasting community change. So Ash, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Geoffrey. And that was such a great intro. I'm like, can you just come with me everywhere and
I'll just
introduce
walk
me
around
in
and I'll
every
do your
room that I walk
intro
into?
for
And I'm
any.
like, ta-da!
Hey, let's make it happen.
I'm blushing. Thank you for
Well,
pulling out all of this great.
it's an impressive resume. It's an impressive resume. So I want to start by talking about a bit of what you do. So let's start by just explain to folks, if people just heard, okay, we're talking to the creative executive officer of the Department of Public Transformation. A lot of people are going to go, huh?
Mhm.
Um, so tell us in a nutshell, who you all are, what it is you do, and then we'll get a little bit more nitty gritty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love what you said about um, just really focusing on, kind of civic infrastructure and creativity and the intersectionality of those two things. So for us, what we do is that we help to get resources to small town leaders and artists and cultural workers who are interested in working more in leadership, community leadership, or inside civic systems. And, again, people will be like, what? Those are a lot of words. So what that really looks like is at what we call at-home artist residencies. So we're, oftentimes rural artists are asked to leave their home places for opportunities and for access to resources. And so we flipped that on its head, and we said, no, you are doing important work in your home
Yeah.
places. You are the people who can tell those stories best. Can we get you resources, a monthly stipend, and access to a project budget to actually do your work in your place more deeper and more meaningfully? And so some of that looks like artistic development, but it's mostly looking like, how do we help in the professional development side of things, help artists step more into their role as community leaders, those that are interested in it. And really looking at creativity as a catalyst for community connection and civic engagement. So on the flip side of that, we also need to support the civic leaders in understanding and recognizing how and why working with artists can help to advance your initiatives and your efforts. So that, it's not just, as something I'm known to say, that arts is not just a cherry on top, but it is an essential ingredient in the ice cream. It's the sugar and the cream. So how do we translate that information to rural community leaders, non-arts partners, city councils, EDA directors, and saying, this is an investment that's going to make your life actually easier and make your residents feel more connected to their place, to the people who live there, and to you and your projects. So some of that is looking like, workshops and on-site engagements and sharing a lot of different case studies and tools and access to resources that are specifically geared toward rural communities. So a lot of this kind of arts-based engagement research has happened more prevalently in urban areas, or access to resources to experiment with this kind of artist in city government or artist in non-arts realms gets supported, recognized, and the stories told that are happening in more urban or metro areas. And that's great. We love that. That's so awesome. We've learned a lot. And it's not just by like, some another friend said, like, it's not just shrinky dinking, what's happening in urban
Yeah, it's not a
areas.
mini version of
It's not
urban.
a
Yeah, I
mini
say that all the
version.
time too. It's not,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not shrinking it. No.
It's not shrinking it into just, it's a very different culture, and each rural place is a very different culture. And so we really spend time getting to know the people in the places that we're working and try to help right size and create programs that are engaging artists or engaging the community leaders that work for that place. Knowing that lots of folks wear lots of different hats, working in communities where the civic artist is also the mayor. And so you're like, okay, this is a fun connection. And so,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
just all
yeah, yeah,
wearing lots
yeah,
of hats.
yeah.
And then the third piece of that is really working on assets develop. So, physical assets. So where are the creative community gathering places? And a lot of the communities we work with, there is not a lot of access to third spaces for people to just connect and engage with each other outside of school, work, and church, and places to eat or drink. And so, like, where are we hanging with each other? And a lot of these communities are like, it's at the gas station coffee
Yeah.
machine, and that's what we have. Or maybe if it's nice out, we can meet outside in a park. But this really looks at, folks who want to be intentionally starting gathering places, watering holes, places to connect with your neighbors, and how can we help get capital assets to rural communities to make those spaces possible. Because just we can get into this a little bit more in the conversation later, but just, of course, the disinvestment in rural, the inequities, and where philanthropic dollars are spent and investments are happening. It's pretty astonishing how little rural gets,
Yeah.
and how hard it is to compete. And so we do a lot of advocacy work around that as well, and pushing, trying to push philanthropy and investors to really consider what's possible in rural spaces.
Yeah, my hope is that might be opening up a bit more with the current moment. We'll see. But yeah, I think that is such important work, and one of the reasons that we have these. You're absolutely right. There are these think tanks and practice leaders, all largely urban centered, and so that's why this work is so important. And folks will hear an echo from a lot of what I often try to share, which is that the most long-lasting arts impact is going to happen when it's sourced from the community itself. And so that's the other reason this is really powerful work, because it's not about bringing outsiders in, it's about sourcing it. Now you are an artist yourself, and
Mhm.
you've talked about um, or described the Department of Public Transformation as a creative civic practice. Um, so, with your artistic background, how did that shape that vision? What was the spark that led to this? Like, tell me a little bit about how these sort of join up, these identities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're integral and like to each other. And I feel like I can't do one without the other, even though sometimes it feels like it is a lot to be doing
Yeah.
a full-time artistic practice and running a national nonprofit, but they talk to each other so much. So I, fell in love with theater in high school from a small town. I think it saved my life. So that has always been like something that has been my driving force. And I realized as I was studying theater that the stories that were being told, that I was being asked to, play roles in, when we were talking about rural spaces, they were either one extreme or the other, like the Pollyanna, pastoral Oklahoma
Mm-hmm.
version of rural, or this like, just very poor, very impoverished, more like, hillbilly
Yep.
version of rural. And neither one is true, and neither one is fully false. Like, it's always complex and somewhere in between, and very nuanced. And so I was like, wait a second, where are the stories of rural America that I know, of the rural people and places that I know? As a young person, thinking about being a storyteller and wanting to write my own pieces, I was just like, this doesn't feel authentic. And so I went on a journey of learning how to tell community-based stories. And that led me to the University of Manchester, and they have an applied theater program. And the applied theater program is you pick a subject matter that you want to apply your theater to. So yes, you're learning some theatrical skills, but you're mostly saying, how does this apply to the education system? How does this apply to public health?
That's
and
great.
So I picked community development, and I focused on rural community development and how can theater as a tool be used to organize, to create more economic opportunities, to engage residents with different issues or topics. And I learned a ton through that project. And but I was in the UK, and I was making plays in the UK, but in small towns, learning about people making plays in small towns in the UK. And so I came back to Minnesota, where I'm from, and was like, I'm going to do this here, and I'm going to start a theater company that tells small town stories here. And I didn't really know what I was doing or how I was doing it, but I remember going to the library and getting a book, like I think it was called Nonprofit for Dummies or something like that. I'm like, I'm going to start a nonprofit.
Yeah, there's that book. Yeah.
And I'm like, this is how I'm going to do this thing.
I think I bought that book at some point too, actually, probably right? Similar.
You're just like, this is how you do it. And early on in the book, maybe the first paragraph, it's like, if you've never worked for a nonprofit, close this book, go get a job at a nonprofit and come back later. So I did that, and I got really involved in the public art world and artist residencies inside city government through an organization called Public Art St. Paul. And it was an urban organization, but it's where I cut my teeth in event production and actually understanding how artists are working within civic systems. So it's a very important part of the journey, because I was really excited to tell stories about small towns. And this opened up this whole other element of the work, and the really deeply embedded civic work, and how this can be impacted inside of governmental systems. And so that was just a step towards DoPT that I didn't know I was taking. And I started place-based productions, not as a nonprofit, because as I started working in a nonprofit, I was like, I don't want to do this. This seems terrible.
Yeah. I want to, at some point, I want to get back to that. So let's just put a pin in that for later.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, this is clunky. I'm just going to run theater. I'm going to do it as an LLC, and we're just going to make things happen and partner with nonprofits in little towns. And then there's skin in the game too, right? You have local partners that are, quote unquote, bringing your artist in. But our whole mission was just to lift up the artists that were there and tell the stories of the people that were there. But there would be myself and a playwright. We were the only two from outside of town. And then we would put together an artistic team that was all made up of local residents and tell with the community their stories. We did a lot of story circles, interviews, workshops, script workshops once we've had a development of the script, to make sure that we are authentically representing these stories through our theater productions. And those productions are all outside. They're all site specific. They move through space, either as bicycle theater, paddling theater, bird watching theater, hiking plays. And it's the idea of activating different spaces within the community with new layers of memories, and looking at some of the complex histories of place, and celebrating and dreaming up what could be possible for the future. And a lot of the small town main streets that we work in, there might be some need for a little bit of love or infusion of hope. And so, what if we transform this main street into the main street of our dreams? What does that look like? And can we invite people to walk down the main street of their dreams and engage with it in a new and exciting way? So I've been doing that for 8 years. When 2017 came around, and without getting too much into politics, just saying, there was this election cycle that was really intense, not too dissimilar from the last one. And I was asking myself, what is my role as an artist working in rural communities to help people get more invested in civic life and engage more meaningfully in their communities? And so I did what I do with my theater practice, was just ask questions of the people who are doing the work. So I bought a little yellow school bus, and I traveled around the country for a number of months. I interviewed 127 rural artists in small towns in 24 different states, and asked that question of people.
Gosh, how did you fund that?
I did a Kickstarter.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow.
I did a Kickstarter, and I got a little micro grant from Springboard for the Arts, one of our deep
Okay, I was about to
partners.
ask too, because we have talked a little bit about Minnesota, and Springboard does work a lot in rural space. So I was curious if they had been.
Yeah, they're good friends, good friends, and longtime partners.
Yeah.
And so that turned into an art project, and I was like, and the project was called Public Transformation. because I had a bus that
Because you had
had
a
the public
bus.
transportation.
Yeah, nice,
Yes,
nice,
yes, yes,
nice,
yes, yes,
nice.
yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
okay. So, and then at the end of this art project, I worked with 4 different artists. It was a revolving artist residency. So I had different artists join me on different parts of the trip, and then they each created pieces. And so we popped up these exhibitions, public transformation exhibitions, where we would share a bunch of our findings from rural America. What is rural America? And like debunking this myth that it's like a monolith, that you can really talk about it as one place, and really pulling out nuanced stories from each of the different communities we visited. And it was it was an opportunity for dialogue around the complexities of ruralness and what the role of arts is. And from that, yes, each place was different, but these themes kept emerging around, artists want to be connected to each other. People need spaces that they want to, activate their work in. People want to get more engaged and involved in the kind of civic realm, but maybe there is need for training, tools, resources. People are really under-resourced, so they needed more support. And really this like field of rural arts and culture, of which Springboard has been, instrumental in helping to foster, alongside a couple of other of our national partners, that there was a need for nurturing the rural arts and culture field specifically. And I wanted to be a part of that. So reluctantly, I started a nonprofit because I was like, well, how do we get resources to these places? And it's like, I think I has to
Yeah,
be
you had to
this.
bite the bullet.
And I'm so glad that I did. And that was in 2018, right after the trip. And we started it and launched it in a what is now our home base in Granite Falls, Minnesota, which was also the first ever community that I did a place-based show in. So I have a long history with this town. I do not live there, but I have a long, deep love and relationship with this community. And we got a bricks and mortar space called the Yes House, which we've been renovating over the last many years and activating as we've gone along. And a lot has been born out of that. And so as a practitioner, I still do place-based productions. I do about 2 shows a year in different communities. It's become more national. It started in Minnesota, but now I just finished a play in Utah, and I'm starting the research process in a play in Southern California. So that has become a little more national and I would say a little more issue-based. It's still place-based, but we're also like looking at water rights, and we're looking at land use,
Right.
and
Well,
really
it's probably the
interesting.
subject matter for that place, right? When you're,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. But that keeps informing Department of Public Transformation, and Department of Public Transformation keeps informing my theatrical practice. So they're intrinsically linked, and I think I can't not be a practitioner and just do administration for so many reasons, but I feel like that's what distances you from the work. And then one thing I'll just say and then we can move on, but the idea of it being place-based productions, it doesn't have a D on it on purpose. It's not place-based production because we don't actually stay in one place. And I want to be really clear about that. I get often asked like, hey, you're a place-based practitioner. I'm like, yes, but I do work in my place where I live, but I also, what I do is help to activate people working in their places. I myself am a nomadic place-based
It's a
practitioner,
toolkit. It's a toolkit for
which
people
is,
where they live.
yeah, and I understand the tension there, and I'm always open to talking more about that and engaging in dialogue around it. But just to say out loud that yes, it is place-based work and it is like local work, but it is led by somebody who doesn't live in that community most often. Which is myself, and then how do we lift up the leaders that are there to continue that work?
Yeah, which is the
Going
only way
forward.
that will continue forward anyway after you leave.
Right, right,
I mean, you can
right, right,
have a
right.
really great sort of civic moment, right, for a community, but for real change, it has to be a practice that's ongoing. Just out of
Yeah,
curiosity, what were all the when you traveled on the bus, what were all the states that you went? How many states did you go through?
there were 24 states, so
Okay.
I won't name them all, but I started in Southern California, Mikiko Masumoto, Delray, California, Masumoto Family Farms. She's an incredible cultural worker, and I highly recommend checking out her work. And then traveled all down through the South, through Texas, through Louisiana, and came up through Kentucky and into up into the Midwest and then into Colorado.
Cool.
So it was a big loop. I didn't get all the way out to the east, though.
It's
I
okay.
also was going where my connections were.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah. No, I think
happens with another trip in the
that's a pretty
Northeast
good
and the
loop
Southeast.
though. That's a pretty good
Mm-hmm.
loop. So when you begin work in a new town, um, what is the first step? What do you look for to understand a community's readiness for creative activation?
As a practitioner, my first step is to, well, we always have a community partner. So it's connecting with them and
Hmm.
saying, as our trusted inroad, who should we be talking with? And then as we're talking with those people, saying again, who else should we be talking with? But also asking the follow-up question, who's not typically here? And
Oh, yeah.
how might we connect with them? Who do you wish that you were getting engaged in this in your organization, or in your neighborhood, or on Main Street? Like who are you not seeing? And finding partners or ways or opportunities to connect with folks that aren't typically engaged. And often that will look like hosting, a block party or a movie night or something for kids that get people engaged, like young families engaged, where we can meet more people and say, hey, we're doing a play about your town and we want you to be in it. We want you to be a part of it. We want your kids to be a part of it. It's an intergenerational experience and we're going to celebrate this place. And often what we hear is like, why do you want to do a play about us? Like, why do you want to do a play about this place? And it's just like this, this kind of
Yeah.
idea that like we're not special
We're
enough.
less
And that's
than
like,
and we're not. Yeah.
yeah, and that just breaks my heart every time. And it's like, because you're amazing. This place is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's amazing getting to learn, and then I was like, yes, we do some version of historical research or ecological research and engage, the environment around us. But really it's not looking back for nostalgia's sake, but really looking back at what people are proud of or excited about, or what things need to heal, or what do we need to grieve, in order to look forward and what we want to see happen in these communities. So it's a lot of dreaming and visioning, and thinking about, magic wand versions of what your town can be, and how is where we came from can get us to where we're going, and what things might we need to leave behind.
Okay.
So that's a lot of the kind of practical element of it, story circles. But my favorite organizing tool is karaoke. And so
Yeah.
we spend a lot of
So
time at karaoke bars
yeah. So Ash and I
getting the
talked a little bit
hands.
about this when we met at Radically Rural, and I was like, oh yeah, because I shared with Ash, there's a lot of parallels to my own story with yours, and I ran this theater festival for a number of years in a small community, and we fell upon the karaoke trick, and it was a complete, like, it was just like literally like, what are we gonna do here tonight on the off night? Well, there's karaoke happening at this local spot. Let's go. And then it turned into this tradition, and it was an amazing connective connection opportunity to the community and people we might not have been reaching otherwise. But you use it in a specific way. So share a little bit about this, because I'm all about the karaoke as a tool right now in small communities. But talk a bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you're right that it is a connective opportunity, because people are there like being vulnerable in a weird
Yeah.
way. Like we're taking risks, we're jumping up on
And people
stage
who
and being
want to
silly.
express
They
something, right?
want
People
to
who
express
want to share.
themselves.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, that when you have an in where you're like, oh my God, that was amazing, or I love that song, or whatever. You have a way to approach
Yeah.
somebody that isn't just like I'm walking up to your table. But because we're doing a play, then we can be like we're scouting,
I was
we're
about to
like,
say
oh,
it's a talent scouting
it's a talent show.
opportunity. Yeah.
It's a talent show. If there's an open mic, we'll go to that too. But often it's a karaoke at the American Legion, and that's how we find our cast. We're like, oh my God, and it's probably folks that aren't coming to an audition.
Yeah.
At
Because they
the
may not even see
local arts
themselves.
gallery, right?
Yeah.
As a theater person, as an
Yeah.
arts person. Some of them yes, but some of them no. And you're just like, no, have we got a part for you? And it's I imagine myself in my younger years singing karaoke at the American Legion and having a director of a play come up and be like, "Have I got a role for you?"
You've got it, kid. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And then I just want to add, as from Department of Public Transformation side of things, what we really do in that work is find the local leaders. And so we're not like coming in and saying like, what should we do here? We're finding the local leaders and saying, what support and resources do you need? And letting them be our guide. So it's much less led by DoPT, and it's much more, we are listeners, and we are trying to connect dots and access to finances. We know that these people that live in these communities know what they need, and they know how to do it. Maybe they might need a little bit of extra skills or support but really what they need is money. They just are like, give us the capital, we can do this work. And so we're trying our best to get resources to the people who already know what they need, and we want to trust them in that, and then additionally connect them to other folks either in their region or nationally that they could learn from, who are in similar sized communities or are working on similar sized projects, and really like providing that container for connection and access to those resources, more so than like, okay, here's what we think you need.
Well, it's so interesting too, because so Ash and I are in a dialogue right now about working with Virginia Commission for the Arts on a project to connect to some regions of the state that their funding isn't reaching, and they're going to be employing us because they want to get money to these communities, but they can't. There's all
Mm-hmm.
these the, knowledge, cultural barriers that are keeping them from each other, right? And so, there are internal resources, there are also external resources, and sometimes it's cultural understanding, it's knowing where to look, it's knowing who to talk to, and also what to say. I'm sure that's also a part of
Mm-hmm.
what you do too. Um, I've been thinking a lot lately about shared power and collaboration. So I'm I'm I have always been a more flat org manager and leader. I'm not a micromanager at all. Part of what I've done over the years is to kind of create a culture and people work within that. But there are also times where decisions have to be made, things have to move forward. And as I exit my role leading a nonprofit and I'm entering into academia, and I sat in a faculty meeting the other day and I was reminded of also some of the dangers in shared governance, in wasted time and energy at points.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people can sometimes, I think there's great power and there's an importance in shared power and collaboration, but there's good ways of doing it and there's bad ways of doing it. And it's there's skills, tactics that can be used, right, so that it is a productive, proactive skill that allows individuals to own what they're doing. I was a theater director by practice as well, and so much of that process with the actor is, if the actor owns it, then it's much more powerful. It's theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Same with a workforce or collaborators or people you're working with. So you all emphasize shared leadership and collaboration, and um, what does that look like? You know, to hand over that kind of creative power to a community. And how do you make it effectively work? How do you make it efficient? How do you not just let it turn into something where a bunch of people are just saying things, some of it helpful, some of it not, nobody ever making a real decision, nothing ever really happening? Like how do you handle that?
I love this question so much. And I will say it is something we are always grappling with. And it is something that we've learned a lot about. I've learned a lot about, but our organization has learned a lot about. And one way that we have been able to help put some structure around this is to say, there's a lot of ways of engaging community and leadership, and just naming clearly and transparently which way you are currently utilizing in terms of collective leadership. Is this process community informed, in which you're going to get information from the community, but you're still in quote unquote the driver's seat in terms of saying, hey, we're going to take all this information, but we're going to decide? Is this community driven, in which like there's a committee of people who are from different parts of the community making a collective decision, but maybe the power is still owned or operated, or like the final say is still within the hands of the organization that's convening the people? Or is this community owned, and this is fully of the community, and we will not move forward like until we are in full consensus? And sometimes it makes sense to do a community owned process, and sometimes it makes sense to do a community informed process. What is most important is that you're clear in what you are doing and why you are
Which
doing
one
it,
it
so
is,
people
and
know.
everybody understands what's
Yeah.
happening.
And everybody knows, and for everybody to know that if it's community owned, it's going to take a long time.
It's gonna take a
It's
much
going to
longer
take a
time.
long time.
Yeah,
It's going to take a long time. It's going to be messier. You got to be here for it. You got to be ready to like have conflict. You got to be ready to, and if it's community informed, that you need to also know that maybe not all of your ideas are going to show up in the final plan, though they were taken into consideration. But there were a lot of things to take into consideration. And, so for example, our organization has a mission statement that we need to uphold. And so if an idea comes in that doesn't align with our mission statement, that idea won't, maybe elements of it will show up in the final delivery of the program or the project, but it won't necessarily be that thing. And so we've had, of course, people feel like they've lost some sense of agency because, wait, I came to this thing and I thought my idea was going to be seen. And what we've learned is you have to be clear and transparent and be held accountable to the process that you have chosen to use. And if you say it's community owned, but you mean community informed, like that's harmful. And
Yeah.
and we've had to learn that the hard way. And I think it's just like, this is how this process is going to work, and this is why it's important. So for some of our committees, we do a lot. All of our programs have advisory groups, and they are structured slightly differently depending on the program and the need. And our work that's place-based in Granite Falls, Minnesota, where the Yes House is, we have a creative collaboration team that helps inform and drive the programming at the Yes House. So they're really engaged and involved, and they're leading stuff. But at the end of the day, our program director there decides which
Makes
events
the
go on the
final call.
calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's what we get funding for, and it's what's on the mission line. We also have an advisory council that kind of is local folks as well, that acts as the how we do the stewardship and ownership of the space. And for us, we're thinking of ourselves as stewards of a third place, and how are we shepherding ideas from the community into it, including how it's run and managed. And so there's a little more ownership in that. And as an organization, being able to say, like, we're going to trust the community to guide us in how this should be operated and stewarded. Yes, you do have to release some power, and hopefully you have built enough trust and relationship that folks are in collaboration with you, but knowing that it's going to be a slower process.
Yeah.
And that you have to be willing to say, if the community is like, what, actually, we want to do something very different, know where your lines are, and having them been communicated early enough in advance to not have that be a huge, barrier. While also being like, this is, but this is your space, so we want to honor that, and what kind of compromise can we come to together. But it's power dynamics, it's messy, it's like a lot of communication, and you can't always be moving quickly. And that was a hard lesson for me personally. I'm a fast mover. I'm a Leo. I like things that go. And you can't do good community work in that speed.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because even thinking about it though, too, just from the artist perspective, if we think of community organizing and this kind of work as artistry, the orientation is already lending itself well to the part of that's giving over, because if your orientation is about supporting and bettering and serving that community as opposed to your individual sort of expression or story to tell, it's not that you don't care, it's just that the orientation is like, hey, this is for you, so and I get joy out of your joy, as opposed to I need this thing and I need people to hear me right now. And so I would say too, just as advice to anybody, and hearing that back, is that orienting yourself to being a facilitator or a vessel is probably really important, and not coming in like, I have a thing I want to say about rural America here, right? Or I have a thing I personally want to express, because it's got to be the community that is saying it or expressing it for it to have the value that you're seeking. So I want to cover two more things before we finish. One is you just mentioned the Yes House, which we haven't talked about yet. We've talked about home base, but and there were some interesting things that, just to get into a couple practical things, there were some interesting things that you brought up in passing to me while we were radically rural that I was really intrigued by. And because the Yes House is a nonprofit organization,
it's a
give
project of Department of Public Transformation. So
okay,
it's not its own. It's not its
okay,
own
so it's an
nonprofit.
extension of it.
Yep. Yep.
But with that, there is a lot of it is tough out in these streets right now for board engagement, real governance, that there's real buy-in and commitment and people are showing up and doing the work. I know this from not just the arts and culture sector, but talking to many of my colleagues in the nonprofit field generally. Right now, this is showing up in social service. It's showing up, and I think we could get into lots of theories of why this is happening. I think it is oriented towards this sort of me moment, right? In terms of technology, our sort of navel gazing that we're constantly doing, sort of general loss of third spaces and connectivity and all the things that you work on. And so because of that, I think you all are really well positioned to try to tackle that. And you talked a little bit about some of the things that you all were doing to create board buy-in and engagement with the Yes House. So, and just as a fast, sort of overview, the Yes House is in process right now. It is a space. It is an arts space, third space that is in a small town. It is governed and led, it sounds like, from the artists there in that community. And it's really in formation right now. It's sort of happening. It's taken over an abandoned building, and so it's helping in terms of property development, economic development. So talk to me a little bit about board engagement, the tools that you all are using, like what you're doing there.
So it's interesting because, Department of Public Transformation has a board of directors, and they're very engaged, and they're artists, and over half are rural, and we do a lot of rural urban solidarity work inside of our leadership structure. So it's not a board of directors that runs the Yes House. It's a board of directors that governs Department of Public Transformation, of which the Yes House is one of the projects. But because the Yes House is our place-based practice and it is a physical space, we have an advisory council that operates, as I had mentioned before, made up of local residents, that operates as informing the operations and stewardship of the space. And then we have a programmatic team. So, some nonprofits are doing a cool kind of split around governance, and saying like, okay, we want some folks to work on the nuts and bolts of how this is run, and we want some folks to work on the events and services that we offer. And so the Yes House is kind of doing a sub tier of the board idea of some folks who are interested more in operations, and some folks who
Traditional
are interested more in
governance versus
programming.
like the application.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we have a Department of Public Transformation board member that serves on both and operates as the conduit of information and connection between our bigger organizational governance and the governance of the Yes House. Plus our staff that is a part of both of those committees and facilitating those committees. And so, I one of the things that I want to be sure to mention is that we do pay those folks. And this is something that I think is really essential in terms of like, how are we going to recreate volunteerism? How are we going to, make sure that folks are feeling like they can show up and give a sense of ownership, their ideas, their time and energy in this precious moment. We do a monthly stipend for the creative collaboration team, and we do a meeting stipend for our advisory council. And so we're saying like, your ideas and thoughts are valuable. We want to pay you for that time. Simultaneously, in order to kind of help with the community work overall, our staff at the Yes House can utilize some of their time, their like clocked time, to be on different committees for like the rodeo, the festivals, the other artist events that are happening around town that other organizations are running. And so we're inviting our community to think about this. What would it be like if every business gave their employees 1 or 2 hours per week of paid time to invest back in the community? What would it look like if we had a little pool of dollars that we could just offset, even if it's a symbolic amount, to pay folks to remember how it feels to be engaged and involved in a volunteer capacity, build up that strength, that
And accountability
skill
too, right?
set,
You're accountable.
accountability. Yeah. And then then when a board position does open up that is volunteer, maybe you feel well equipped to do it and you're engaged enough that you want to participate. But to just like we just need volunteers, and keep yelling into the void without doing something that is a really intentional invitation and some kind of reciprocity, it's going to be really hard for us to get back to or ahead to a place where folks feel like they have the capacity to engage or the desire to engage in the ways that we're asking them to. And there's a lot we could say about it, but I think you've named them all, like the digital world that we live in and the social connection that has been fragmented in our communities. It's all on purpose, it's divisive on purpose. But we have to be creative in how we're combating or don't use like aggressive language like that, but how we're like counteracting what's being fed to us and forced on us in a lot of ways. And saying like, okay, like I'm your neighbor, you're my neighbor. The whole idea behind this is that when you're in need, I'm going to show up, and when I'm in need, you're going to show up. But if one of us isn't playing, then it doesn't work. And that's how I feel like our cities overall need to be thinking about, like, we need to be investing in those relationships, and like you need to feel like you are cared for and that you are loved in order for you to say, I care about this place and I love this place.
Yeah.
I care about you back. I mean, that's how every relationship is. You have to invest in the relationship itself rather than just like, why is nobody coming? Why is nobody running for office? Why does nobody care? It's like, well, how much have you shown that you care?
Yeah, and getting angry about it. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's such a moment. And I've been even personally struggling with at points, um, with being really, it's not healthy. It's not good. I get really angry. And that's a whole other maybe podcast, and maybe I'll lay down on a couch and share it with my therapist. But I think it's because of feeling that reciprocal, and this is another conversation for another time. Maybe we can tee it up for another point. But I do feel that there's also exhaustion in the field of giving as a nonprofit worker, and because there's all these external distractions for the community at large, then not sort of getting back to. And where do you go in that relationship, right? Like if it's a personal relationship, you break it off, or you end it, you move on. But it's like your home, you live there, it's your livelihood. You can't just walk away from it. So you end up getting angry and, and sort of sitting in that, and it's not a good place for anybody. But what I like about this is that I think we can kind of stew in like, you should be doing this. And then there is I'm going to actively do this on my side, so that then in turn you might, revert back, and come back to me. So I think that is, I think that's probably important, an important message. So here's my,
And
yeah,
I
go ahead.
have, this is a final question, but this is a quick one. I have a rule that if I say the words someone should do something, that I immediately point that finger back at myself. I'm like, damn it. That means that
I
I
think
have
that
to do.
is spot on. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, so, so this is my last question. Is, I want to go back because we put a pin in it. We put a pin in I've been really interested of late of alternative models for delivering the arts. I do think sometimes a nonprofit is just necessary, and I do think that there are funds that are available that you need to access, that 501(c)(3 is necessary to do. I also think, even though I'm skeptical right now about a lot of the nonprofit setup, to our earlier conversation, there is a lot of advantages to community representation within your organization. Like if we look at a board of directors, and that is the community represented within your organization and institution, and there's lots of ways of activating that and making it work, and having it be really productive for you. At the same time, though, there's all kinds of issues in and around what that funding means, what that funding pushes you to do, compromises that have to be made at points. So we don't need to get into, maybe at another point we'll get into the Department of Public Transformation's 501(c)(3 need. But I think what I'm kind of curious about as a theater maker, I think going back to the artist, just nuts and bolts, like how do you make that work? How do you make that work without that nonprofit toolkit for fundraising?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. The way that I make it work is that I have a full-time job. That is Department of Public Transformation.
Yeah.
So, when my theater partner place-based productions partner and I started off on this journey, we were like, we're gonna figure this out. We are gonna figure out how to be a successful nomadic LLC. We're gonna make a decent living making theater in small towns all around the country, and it's gonna be amazing. When we tried really hard and we put some bright minds around us to help us try to come up with a really unique, innovative business model to make it so. And it wasn't viable. It just wasn't. Like, in order to pay two people's salaries, to travel, when we want to do work in rural communities that don't have a lot of resources or access to resources, I think you can make it work in other contexts. But the kind of work that we were doing is, and it's project based. It's like we get invited by the community. It's a long process of courting and relationship building and working with that town to help them get the resources to hire us. So we're not applying for grants through place-based productions, but we're working with a nonprofit based in that community to apply for grants to hire us to come in, or a city might use it as one of their line items, a public art line item or something like that, to bring us in. But it's piecemeal and we barely make ends meet. So I don't have like a magic wand of this is how you do it. It's like, I would love to hear a different answer to that question. But when we're working with communities that don't have a lot, we can't charge a lot, we don't want to charge a lot, and we want to still do this work. I had to subsidize my income, and that's, not why I started DoPT, but I always had other work going on the whole time I've been doing place-based. There hasn't been a time where I've been only doing that work. We were doing 4 or 5 shows a year trying to piece it together, and that also was not, it was not sustainable. Like, maybe we were
that's
making enough to
exhausting.
keep our head above water, but you're trying to hold 5 different communities' stories. You're not doing a good job.
Yeah, that's
And
a great point too. Yeah, you're not able to
yeah,
give them the attention that they
you're
need.
not, you're
Yeah.
not. So, I'm still working on it.
No, I think I appreciate that answer though. I think it's an honest answer. I think it's actually important for
Yeah.
us to talk about how, I, I'm getting ready to launch this graduate program, and I think it's important to share with those students as they begin to enter the field, like, hey, this is tough, and you have, supplementary income. This is, before I was able to do arts administration as a full-time job, I was in academia during the day and then rehearsing projects at night and weekends and sort of piecing it all together and making it happen. And there's just a certain reality there. And it's probably about piecing it together in a way that makes it work for you, and coming to, at least in this circumstance, coming to terms, it sounds like, with, you know, uh, living life, paying bills, and also having the work that sustains you because it feels good to do.
Yeah, and let me just end with this, because I think this is the hopeful part of it. We made Department of Public Transformation with a 150-year vision, and that vision is around increasing the value of arts in rural communities, and increasing, and our work really looks at the advocacy of getting more resources to rural places. So I might not be able to have an LLC theater company doing work in rural communities because of the access to resources that currently exist, but in 150 years from now, the goal is that the next Ashley will, that the next person who's doing this, because the idea of arts being an essential ingredient to community life will have been increased, that we should invest in this, we should pay for this,
Yeah, I
that we
like that. Yeah,
should.
that eventually we
And
don't have to do. Yeah,
yeah, and then that philanthropy, 20% of people live in rural places, less than 7% of philanthropic dollars go there. That's appalling. That is
it's
embarrassing.
insane. Yeah,
And it's like, no wonder that the infrastructure is crumbling. And
and
so,
the
a
people are
lot of our
angry
work is,
too. That they're
and
also
people are
angry.
angry, and there's exactly, and I understand why, and I've lived it, I understand why. And so part of our long-term vision is like, can we double that? If you doubled what philanthropy was giving, we would still be under
It still
6,
wouldn't. It still
so
would be equitable.
yes,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
still would not be equitable. And so, like, this is it's a very long game, and in the meantime, we're trying to find ways to keep artists going, and to keep artists thriving, and as best we can, and to help shift the needle, both inside of philanthropy and the access to resources, but also the ways in which people are willing to pay for and invest in their local artists.
That's awesome. Well, Ash, I know this won't be the last time I utilize your insights, knowledge, and experience to reach the people in my bubble. And really, from one small town kid to another, appreciate you, and I think it's really inspiring, and I know that I'm positive actually that I'll be referencing Ash's work and some of the things they're doing more in the future as we move forward, and maybe there'll be a second interview in the future here sometime soon. So,
Well,
Ash,
thank you,
thank
Geoffrey,
you
so much.
so much. And she travels all over, so maybe she'll be coming through your neck of the woods at some point. And those in Virginia, we're looking forward and hoping to be able to bring the Department of Public Transformation to Virginia too to do some work. So
Thank
appreciate
you,
you.
Geoffrey.
Yeah, thank
And thank
you.
you for your work lifting up stories like this. I mean, this is how
Hey, we're
people find
gonna.
out about
I
us, but
I
also
like
find
your
out about them.
150 years because that I think is
Yep.
important for me to remember. I sometimes get frustrated, and I need to remember it's a long game. So I appreciate it. I think
It's a long game.
that's a good place to end it too. It's a long game. Everybody,
Okay.
hang in there. Thanks,
Thank
Ash.
you.
Yeah. It can be difficult to find resources for arts organizations, artists, and civic leaders looking to promote the arts in smaller communities. Small Town Big Arts is a podcast for those looking to boost the arts in rural and small town America. From the mountains of Kentucky to the Alaskan coast, each episode speaks with leaders in the field successfully navigating issues of fundraising, waning board engagement, local politics, and employee and volunteer retention. If you are in a community with less than 100,000 residents and the arts are important to you, find our monthly episodes by searching Small Town Big Arts.